Foreign influence in Canadian politics is a problem. With me is John Barlow, MP for Foothills, Alberta. I'm Blaine Calkins, Member of Parliament for Red Deer Lacombe. I have a bill C-406 that's going to end third parties from using foreign money to advertise in our elections. And John, you're going to be speaking to that bill today. What do you hear on the doorsteps when you're talking to people?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Blaine, for bringing this private member's bill forward. This is extremely important. We've certainly seen since 2015 that I think we can't underestimate the fact that we are not immune to foreign entities, foreign actors influencing our elections. This is an attack on our sovereignty. This is an attack on a pillar of our democracy, which is our elections. And I'm certainly hearing from my constituents who are extremely concerned about the impact that foreign entities are having, not only in our elections, but we've seen it with pipelines, with development in agriculture and those types of things. I think this is something we have to take very seriously.
Absolutely, John. I couldn't agree more. That's why I was proud to bring this bill forward. Canadians should be deciding who determines who sits in our House of Commons, who sits in our Parliament, and the money that is raised within Canada to go towards elections should be Canadian money. Canadians and Canadians alone should be doing this. This bill is about patriotism and making sure that we defend ourselves, we identify as a nation as Canadians, and that's what my bill is here to protect, is our election. So thank you very much for supporting it.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I look forward to the debate this afternoon.
Fantastic.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Foothills.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And it is a pleasure to speak today to Bill C-406, tabled by my colleague from Red Deer Lacombe, which is a bill that would amend the Canada Elections Act to ban foreign contributions to third parties for election advertising purposes. And I would just say some of the comments that we've heard prior to my intervention go to the very reason why I think this legislation is so important. And I want to point to the comments from the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Democratic Institutions, who was very clear that he's not going to support this legislation, but then said there's no proof whatsoever that there's been any interference in Canadian elections in the past. That just proves how naive the Liberal government is in the situation that we are facing right now. We have a group out there, Lead Now, that is on their website bragging about how many ridings they influenced in the 2015 election. A third-party group that spent more than $1 million in the 2015 election, and almost 20% of those dollars were raised by foreign actors. So for a government to say that, I guess we shouldn't really question this, because this has sort of been the theme with them all week in the last couple of weeks when it comes to SNC-Lavalin. There's nothing to see here, nothing to fear. Don't worry, we've got everything under control. Just go to bed at night and sleep well. Well, the proof is there that there was certainly influence in the 2015 election by foreign entities funding these third-party groups in Canada that were going to very specific target ridings and having an impact on a Canadian election.
That's right.
I would just like to, you know what, I would say if this came up 4 years ago, I was probably one of those ones that didn't think this was probably an issue. But that changed significantly during the 2015 election campaign. Many of us here in this House go and help our colleagues or our friends in other ridings when they do their door knocking and their canvasses. I remember going through Calgary Centre during the 2015 election, and I was shocked at the number of lawn signs that I saw on public boulevards and public spaces. What surprised me was the fact that those lawn signs outnumbered every political party 2-to-1. These signs were not Liberal, they were not New Democrat, they were not Green, and they were not Conservative. These lawn signs were put up by Lead Now and Tides. The amount of money that that group spent in that one riding was incredible. And when you have third parties spending more than $1 million in a campaign, let's put that in perspective. The average party in a constituency probably spends around $50,000 to $75,000. This group spent 30 times that in our election. So to say that there's nothing to see here and there's no proof of foreign funding having an impact on Canadian elections, I think is extremely naive.
Disingenuous at best.
And it shows why this private member's bill brought up by my colleague, C-406, is so important. And I'm very proud to support that. Now, when we talk about, Madam Speaker, we talk about the activism that's going on in our country, and then they're having an influence on our elections. That should be extremely concerning to Canadians. As I think everyone in their presentations have said so far, Canadian elections should be decided by Canadians, period. But earlier this year, I had the opportunity to travel to Brussels and meet with many of our NATO partners and representatives from those countries. And we talked about foreign influences in their elections. It is a top priority for our NATO partners, who are doing everything they can to address cybersecurity and tightening up their own elections legislation to limit the opportunities for foreign influence in their elections. Canada is not immune to this, and we have a Liberal government that passed C-76 with very minimal strategies to address foreign funding is concerning. And this private member's bill, C-406, will close that loophole when it comes to the influence foreign funding will have on future Canadian elections. We are not immune. It's happened. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to happen again. Elections are sacrosanct to a free and sovereign country. Times have changed. Unfortunately, we've seen it in the United States, we've seen it in other Western democracies, we've seen it in Canada. Our elections are open and vulnerable to foreign influences, whether that's at the cyber level or funding third-party organizations that are well organized and target specific ridings to make an impact. We should not allow that to happen, Madam Speaker.
Ever.
Third-party associations should not be allowed to accept foreign funding for the use in Canadian elections. And that's what Bill C-406 will do. It will close that loophole to ensure that these third-party groups cannot accept foreign funding, period. This will make it easier to enforce, easier to track, and ensure that Canadian elections are protected. But we shouldn't be surprised, Madam Speaker, that the Liberals are leaving this loophole there, because they've been quite clear that they have no issues with foreign entities and foreign actors influencing a Canadian policy. We have a Liberal government that ensured that Canadian taxpayer dollars were used to fund summer jobs for Lead Now and Tides that actively protested against Canada's own energy sector. So if they're going to allow these foreign funds to impact our decision-making on our own economy, on massive infrastructure projects, on nation-building projects like pipelines, and we've seen what's happened with Trans Mountain, a project that's integral to Canada's economy. But, you know, let's not concern ourselves with, once again, foreign actors influencing our Canadian economy, and certainly our natural resource sector, and the more than 100,000 jobs that have been lost as a result of the activism, most often from foreign entities. So if we're going to turn a blind eye to that, it only makes sense that they would turn a blind eye to foreign influences in Canadian elections. This is no mystery, Madam Speaker. Foreign money has been used, and as I said, these third-party groups are actively in the public, on their websites, bragging about how successful their efforts have been in influencing a Canadian election. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not speculation. It is proven. In fact, Tides spent more, as I said, spent more than $1.5 million in influencing our Canadian election. The Canada Revenue Agency got their attention. They are investigating Tides for how that money was raised and how it was spent. So again, for the Parliamentary Secretary for Democratic Institutions to think that this has never happened in Canada, I find to be very disconcerting. This is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister who should be extremely concerned about the influences foreign entities and foreign actors would have on the Canadian election. And he was quite honest that he said, it's not an issue, it's not a problem. We don't need any legislation to protect ourselves from this. I find that, in all honesty, to be ridiculous. It's quite proven that this is happening. And Madam Speaker, we're now in an election year. and it's quite clear that the Liberals have proven that they are not going to take this issue seriously. This is not something that they are taking earnestly and are refusing to take steps to close that loophole. And I find it interesting that the Liberals and my colleague from the NDP keep talking about this being a nonpartisan issue. I'm not saying this is a partisan issue, but I'm saying that there's a very clear void, a gap in the legislation that we are bringing forward an opportunity to correct that mistake that was in C-76, which just does not have the teeth that is needed to ensure that Canadian elections are protected. This is a pillar of our a foundation of our Canadian democracy, plain and simple. If we cannot trust that our elections are fair and Canadians alone are deciding who forms our government and who their representative is in their constituency, we have a very serious problem. Bill C-406 will end any opportunity for foreign influence in a Canadian election. The integrity of our democracy, the integrity of our electoral system is at stake, and I would ask all members of this House to support Bill C-406. It is a priority. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Well done.